Okay. Hello, and welcome to the Psychic Eye Mysteries podcast, third segment. We're at number 3, week number 3. Crowd goes wild. I'm your host, Victoria Laurie, here with my beautiful sister, Sandy, who has the eye roll that's heard around the world. Mostly at me. It's directed at me. You're all spared. I know I'm lucky. So today,
years perfecting.
People wonder why I put so many eye rolls in my books. Everybody's always rolling their eyes. I can't imagine where we get it from, Sans, where I get it from. I'm inspired by you.
It's in my favorite emojis, the eye roll.
Right? The eye roll. Exactly. Yeah. Right. Speaking of inspired, look what I've got.
I've serious eye rolls.
Oh, she loves me. She knows she does. I immortalize her in books. This is why she loves me. Sandy actually cannot tell me any kind of an embarrassing story at all.
I cannot.
Because it'll end up in a book. And there's one that I'm saving that I haven't told yet.
I will disown you if you put it in. I will.
Oh, I'm so tempted. Like, that's like...
I'll disown you. I'm serious. I'll disown you. It'll be the end of it.
Oh, well,
you'll be talking to my lawyers.
It hasn't gone in yet. It's fiction, guys. They'll never know. They'll never know that it was based. They won't know that it's based on a real thing.
It'll be like this very embarrassing scene for Kat. People are like, oh, that's the story. How much is this is fiction? None of it.
Come on, Sandy. That's the best story ever.
I'm telling you right now, I will disown you, and you will be talking to my lawyers. Okay.
Oh God.
I don't have a lawyer.
Whatever. Yeah, exactly.
I'll find one.
Whatever. Might be worth it. Anyway, Coached to Death is the first book in the Kat Kelly series. This is a spinoff of the Abby Cooper series and the MJ Holliday series. So the Ghost Hunter Mystery series, which features MJ Holliday and Kelly Gillespie, and the Psychic Eye Mysteries, which features Abby Cooper and sometimes her sister, sometimes her sister, Kat. So Kat has ventured off. She's gotten divorced. Kat is a mega mogul, marketing genius, very much like my sister.
I'm not a mega mogul.
Someday.
No, just not
someday. Fingers crossed someday. Be hopeful. Yeah, exactly. Mega mogul, sold her business, raking in the dough, and she decides to become a life coach. And Gilly Gillespie, who is now her BFF, comes to join her. And her very first client kind of presents a strange issue. But while she's dealing with that, there's a neighbor up the street that is murdered, and Kat is blamed for that murder. So it's a good book.
So
it's a
like
book.
My life, I get blamed for murders
right?
all the time.
Exactly. We stumble over the dead bodies constantly. So that's Coached to Death, available everywhere books are sold. So check it out if you'd like. Okay, anecdotes. I had an awesome week this past week. A shit ton of readings. My appointment book is blowing up, which is kind of fantastic and fabulous because I get all of this practice in for this mediumship stuff that I've been working to get better at. And, there are nights where it's just super frustrating for me. I don't think my clients are noticing much, but like if I don't get a name in a reading, I get pissed off at myself. So what I noticed actually last night, I was reading for a woman and I hadn't said a single name, but I was describing people and situations that were absolutely super specific to the people that I was describing, which was great. So deceased relatives were stepping forward from the other side and they were giving me anecdotes and they were giving me, physical kind of attributes that really could only be them. So we were identifying deceased loved ones kind of that way. And then as I was reading this woman, there was this feeling sort of at the base of my throat and kind of this the words "say Ruth." Okay. Came up. So Ruth is a very significant name for Sandy and myself. Our grandmother, our favorite grandmother, her name was Ruth, Margaret. We call her Margaret. And the reason we call her Margaret is because my mother's name is Ruth and we just don't like to call her at all, anything. So we try and avoid the Ruth sometimes. Okay. My middle name actually used to be Ruth, and I changed it to Margaret to be the same middle name as my grandmother's middle name, just to avoid the whole Ruth thing. So Ruth is it's a name that kind of rings a lot of bells for me. And so because I had kind of had this feeling like say Ruth, there was that, oh gosh, that urge to say the word Ruth. I thought, okay, is this just me imposing this on this reading because my grandmother's name, my middle name are monster, monster mother, her name. Her mother is just not a nice person. And I don't care if she listens to this podcast, and I don't give a flying fuck if she hears it, because she's not cool. Sandy knows. Sandy and I were raised by the same demon. Anyway. Oh God, I'm airing dirty laundry today. I'm just like letting it all fly.
Why don't you just share your social security number while you're at it? My middle name is.
Okay.
My legal name is.
Oh God. Anyway.
My mother's maiden name is.
Anyway, so I finally giving it all away. Well, this isn't anything that's like not in the books either, right? Because Abby's mother is, very abusive and just a horrible human being. And, life imitates art. Art imitates life.
Either way.
In our case, both ways.
There's imitation happening, people.
Exactly. So I said, does the name Ruth mean anything to you? And it happened to be the aunt that we were identifying. And that was her name. And so what I noticed about that moment that I realized had applied to all of the other times where I had said the exact name was where it came from. So I kind of had this feeling like when you get a name as a medium, you should get it like around your ears, right? You're listening, like that makes sense. Like, kind of up in here around your head. But this actually came from like, if you believe in chakras, the throat chakra. It kind of came up like from my neck area. And I realized that there was another specific reading that I did, which is the one that I'm going to talk about tonight, where that exact same thing happened that time as well. It's the area where the source of the name comes from. So now I'm just going to kind of wait to see if anything bubbles up from my neck area, if the name bubbles up from my neck area, and then I'll say it out loud. And I'm going to stop this kind of reaching for names or reaching to guess names or anything like that. If they want to give it, fantastic. If they don't, then they don't. Then I'm just going to try and identify these relatives on the other side by any anecdotes they want to give or personality traits or whatever they want to give. I'll leave it up to them to offer the proof. But now I know where it comes from. So now I know how to recognize it, which is that feels to me like a step. A step forward on this strange mystery of trying to figure out how to become a medium, how to be a quality medium, actually. So speaking of the source where those names come from, I was reading for this woman, I think at the beginning of the week, and she had wanted, the reading was like terrific, lots of people coming through, on the nose. And then she had asked if I could connect her to her sister. So her sister hadn't necessarily come forward to me. I tried to reach out to her. And sometimes it feels like whoever is in the quote unquote room, whoever on the other side is in sort of this waiting area, kind of waiting to talk or is talking. Those are the only souls in the room. So when I try and reach out to someone, it's interesting because I don't necessarily always feel them. Until there's like this trickle of information that starts coming in. And it takes a couple of trickles of information, a couple of tidbits before I can actually kind of feel that soul. And this was a similar case for this woman's sister. So she immediately said I had cancer. So I verified that was in fact correct with my client. And she was giving me this feeling like all kind of up in the chest area. And so I asked her, was it breast cancer? Did she have, cancer in her lymph nodes? And she said, no, it was uterine cancer. So I kind of feel like that gesture of the chest area was like the lady bits, it happened in the lady bits. So from now I'm going to be a little bit more generic with that. And uh, she was making my lungs feel congested. And she gave me the impression that she was putting this feeling on her sister. So I asked my client, pardon that.
It's a big creature walking around behind you.
It's the dog.
Don't be alarmed.
Exactly. I know. The resident ghost.
Red
In the
ghost.
form of Emmy the dog.
Yes.
Hello, nut job. How are you? The dog is throwing things around. Anyway, so she was making me feel like my lungs were congested. She was putting that onus on her sister. So I asked the sister, I said, you need to be careful of any bronchial infections. And she said, well, I had COVID. And I said, oh, did it go to your lungs? She said, no. She said, I had Delta and I dealt with it just fine. And I was like, congratulations, that's fantastic. And I said, you've had the vaccine, correct? And she said, no. And her sister kept showing me the shot in the arm. That's why I thought she had the vaccine. And that's why I thought, basically it had saved her life. And she said, no, I don't believe in the vaccine. I don't want to get the vaccine. And her sister was not backing off at all. Her sister was like insisting that she go and get the vaccine. And she was making me feel like the congestion, the lung thing was in the future. It was COVID related. And even though this woman had Delta and probably would develop some antibodies from it, at some point in the future, I felt like a variant was going to come along and this woman was going to get sick and develop COVID of the lungs, and it was going to not kill her, but scar her. There was a feeling of like, once those lungs get damaged, there's no coming back from that. And her sister kept insisting that all of this. And I felt my client was like resisting, kind of like, okay, Victoria, get off of your high horse. You're putting this on me. Right.
And your evil master plan.
I know. Yeah, exactly. I want to save your freaking life. Anyway. So that's when I felt that same familiar kind of from the throat area. The sister said, send my love to Mark. So I asked my client, was your sister married? She said, no. I said, she had a sweetheart, right? She said, yes. And I said, she keeps saying, send my love to Mark. And she goes, that's her boyfriend. That's the name of her boyfriend. So for me, that was confirmation. And I tried to say, listen, your sister would not offer that up as a, like, it's really me. If she didn't, if she wasn't saying, get the fucking shot, this was like confirmation. What Victoria is saying that I'm saying to you is true. And it's hard, it's hard because I can imagine from her side, I'm sounding preachy, right? I'm sounding like her, doctors and Fauci and all of that stuff. And there's that resistance to that message, which I understand. But on the other side, I don't know that they understand all of the barriers to convince people sometimes that it's, there's a bias. And on the other side, their numbers are swelled just from the Americans. Of almost 800,000 people, are over there that shouldn't be over there right now due to COVID. So even the dead want you to get vaccinated, people. Don't take my word for it. Don't take Fauci's word for it. Take the dead, take their word for it. Go get a fucking vaccine. So, I don't know. I don't know if she'll get a vaccine. I hope she does. It's up to her. Fingers crossed. I don't want anybody to get COVID. I certainly don't want anybody to get COVID where their lungs are permanently damaged. So off my soapbox, but please get vaccinated. So on that kind of bummer, but I thought it was really cool that like the dead would be so,
yeah, I agree,
concerned about you getting the latest medical, technology, so to speak, science.
Well, I think what's really fascinating is the idea that people are dying prematurely, right?
Oh yeah.
It wasn't planned for all of these souls to cross. And
Absolutely.
So the messaging is starting to get more prominent about.
I kind of wonder if John Edward sort of has this, the same thing, because he's sort of been in the thick of reading for people who have had relatives and loved ones who actually died of COVID come through. And I saw a broadcast with him I forget what it was on, but I saw a broadcast with him where he was talking about how he identifies someone who's crossed over from COVID. And the way he described it was, it's like a skyscraper where all the lights are on every floor. And from the top down, the lights start going off floor by floor. And he said, it's a system failure. Things start shutting down.
Oh, goodness.
Which I thought was an amazing metaphor. That's not how I get it. I kind of get a sense of, I don't know. Mine's more like what fails first. If a kidney starts to fail, or if liver function starts to fail, or if the brain shuts down, I kind of tend to go to that first and then follow that thread to see what else is, kind of collapsing in on itself. I don't know that I get a nice clear metaphor like a skyscraper with lights going off. I wish I did. That would be cool. But it's more kind of my feel for me. So it's interesting the way that information is both similar and dissimilar amongst the people in my craft, because they don't communicate. I don't know that they communicate with us the same way, every person. And why would they, right? Because my references are different than his, and experiences are different than his, and things like that. But yeah, it's really interesting.
Can I ask you, do you find that when you're forecasting for someone, like giving them a clairvoyant reading, if the noise, the voice that you hear in your head is a different voice than what you're hearing when you're great? I'm not going to have a bad dream tonight.
It's my voice.
It's always your voice. Okay.
Yeah,
so you're not necessarily hearing the person that you're connecting with on the other side.
No, there's no sense of sound. It's the idea of the word, right? So when I say I heard say Ruth, there's a feeling of planted in my brain are the words say Ruth, not that a disembodied voice is, Victoria, say Ruth. There's none of that. That would be cool if that were the case, but that's not how it happens. It's the idea of, or the words like you would read them, get planted.
Got it. And then you hear it in your head. Okay.
Yeah. It's my own voice saying it. Yeah. Whew. All right. We've got a doozy. This mystery was, of everyone we've done so far, this was the most difficult energetically for me to figure out. Once I did figure it out, I feel really strongly that this is exactly what happened. But it was very confusing because of some of the stories or theories that kind of came out of this disappearance. And you have what you hit on, what you thought happened. And
not intuitively.
Maybe it was, Sans.
No.
Maybe it was. You globbed onto it. I think there were parts of that side of it that show up in what I feel actually happened. And we can discuss that when we get there. So Sandy's going to take it away. This is the mystery of the disappearance of Dorothy Arnold.
So what's interesting is we're recording this in December of 2021, and this mystery unfolded on December 12th, 1910, which was 111 years ago. So Dorothy Harriet Camille Arnold was born on July 1st, 1885 in New York City, the second of 4 children of perfume importer Francis Rose Arnold and his wife, Mary Martha Parks Arnold. Everybody had a lot of names. She had an older brother by 1 year, John, and 2 younger siblings, Dan and Marjorie. Dorothy's father, Francis, was a senior partner of F.R. Arnold and Company, an importer of fancy goods. The Arnolds were prominently featured in the Social Register, which is the definitive guide to New York City's richest families. Before her mysterious disappearance, Dorothy lived a charmed life. She was educated at Bryn Mawr College in Pennsylvania, where she majored in literature and language. And after graduating in 1905, Dorothy returned to live at her family's home on 79th Street, where she pursued a career as a writer. In the spring of 1910, Dorothy submitted a short story to McClure's magazine, which was rejected. Her friends and family, who were amused by her writing aspirations, teased her about her rejection. So she rented a post office box to discreetly receive correspondence from magazines and publishing houses. In November of 1910, she submitted a second story to McClure's entitled The Poinsettia and the Flame, but that story was also rejected. According to her friends, the second rejection left her dejected, wrong page, dejected and embarrassed. Dorothy did compose a third story entitled Lotus Leaves, but whether that story was also rejected isn't definitively known. Serene and studious, at 25 years of age, Dorothy stood 5'4" in height and weighed about 140 pounds. She had a healthy complexion, steady blue eyes, and wore her brown hair in a high pompadour. The day of her disappearance, Dorothy was expensively dressed in a custom-tailored suit with a blue serge coat and a tight hobble skirt in a matching color. She carried both a huge silver fox, mutt, and a satin handbag, but her most noticeable accessory was her hat. It was made of black velvet with 2 blue roses for decoration. The oversized designer chapeau featured a blue lining and a scalloped lace trim. Dorothy added a lapis lazuli matching hat pin and earrings to complement her outfit. At about 11 a.m. that morning, Dorothy descended the stairway of the magnificently furnished family home and found her mother waiting in the main hall. Dorothy informed her that she planned to spend the day shopping for an evening dress to wear at her sister Marjorie's debutante ball, which was scheduled a week later on December 17th. Dorothy declined her mother's suggestion to accompany her on her shopping trip. She then left the family home at around 11 a.m. with $25 of her $100 monthly allowance and the remainder of her $36 bank withdrawal from the day before, which she partially used to lunch with friends and attend a matinee. The amount in today's dollars is around $700 to $850. December 12th was not a pleasant weather day. The air was raw and strips of ice made Fifth Avenue sidewalks somewhat treacherous. Yet Dorothy walked 20 blocks from her home on 79th Street towards Fifth Avenue to the corner of 5th and 59th, and around noon stopped in at Park and Tilford's candy counter. There she charged a half-pound box of chocolates to her account, placed her purchase in her muff, and then walked another 22 blocks south to Brentano's bookstore at 27th Street and 5th Avenue. While at Brentano's, she purchased Engaged Girl Sketches, a book of humorous essays by Emily Calvin Blake. Neither of the clerks who waited on Dorothy in either store reported that Dorothy exhibited any unusual behavior. Outside the bookstore, Dorothy ran into her friend Gladys King. Gladys recalled that the two spoke briefly about Marjorie's upcoming debutante party, and coincidentally, Gladys happened to have her RSVP in her muff, which she handed to Dorothy, joking about the postage saved. The woman stood chatting for several minutes, and then Gladys had to excuse herself to meet her mother for lunch at the Waldorf Astoria. It was nearly 2 o'clock, and Gladys was now late. She recalled that Dorothy told her she was going to walk home through Central Park. As Gladys hurried away, she stopped on the far corner of 27th Street, turned back to wave a second goodbye to Dorothy. That was the last time Dorothy Arnold was ever seen alive. By the early evening, Dorothy had failed to return home for dinner, which was unusual. Worried, the Arnolds began calling Dorothy's friends, but no one reported seeing her or knowing where she might be. Fearing unwanted media attention that could become socially embarrassing, on the morning following Dorothy's disappearance, her brother John phoned his friend, John S. Keith, a junior partner at a law firm. Upon Mr. Keith's arrival at the family home, he searched Dorothy's bedroom. Except for the outfit she was wearing, all of Dorothy's clothes and belongings were in her room. Opening a desk drawer, he found a pile of personal letters, some with foreign postmarks. On the desktop, he noted 2 transatlantic steamship folders, and then he peered into the fireplace, and here he discovered a small mound of burned papers. As Mr. Keith rose to his feet, John suggested that the burned papers might be Dorothy's rejected manuscript. Over the course of the next few weeks, Mr. Keith visited jails, hospitals, and morgues in the cities of New York, Pennsylvania, and Boston, but did not find any sign of Dorothy. When his search proved fruitless, he suggested that the Arnold family hire the Pinkerton Detective Agency. Pinkerton officials immediately mailed a descriptive circular about Dorothy to police departments all over the country, which also featured a reward of $1,000 for any information leading to her return. Frances Arnold finally contacted the New York Police Department on January 26, 1911, 6 weeks after her disappearance, and filed an affidavit stating that he believed that she had been murdered. By all accounts, Dorothy disappeared from a very busy street in broad daylight with thousands of people and law officers moving about. How and why she disappeared has been an unsolved mystery for these 111 years. There are 4 distinct theories about Dorothy's disappearance. She was murdered in Central Park. At the insistence of the police on the afternoon of January 25th, Francis Arnold reluctantly called reporters to his office. With a gloomy disposition, he informed the reporters that he believed his dear daughter was dead, theorizing that she had been attacked in Central Park as she walked home and that her body might have been tossed in the park's lake or reservoir. His theory was quickly dismissed, however, as the reservoir was frozen over due to the frigid winter weather. Still, when the reservoir subsequently thawed, the police did a search for Dorothy's body, but came up empty-handed. Another theory is that her lover was responsible. During the press conference, reporters asked Francis if it were possible that his daughter was still alive and had simply run away with a man. Francis vehemently denied this, stating, "I would have been glad to see her associate with more young men than she did, especially some young men of brains and position, one whose profession or business would keep him occupied. I don't approve of young men who have nothing to do." Reporters soon discovered that Francis's harsh commentary was in reference to George C. Grisham Jr., who preferred to be called Junior. Dorothy and Junior met when she was attending Bryn Mawr and became romantically involved. At 42 years of age, Junior was quite a bit older than Dorothy. The plump, sideburn trained engineer came from a wealthy Pennsylvania family with whom he still lived at the Kenmar Hotel in Pittsburgh and Summers on Nantucket. In September of 1910, Dorothy had lied to her parents about her trip to Boston with a former Bryn Mawr classmate. Instead, she spent a week at the Hotel Lenox to visit with Junior, who was registered at the nearby Essex Hotel. The two were constantly seen together, looking animated and happy, and they made no effort to hide their identities or their presence in Boston. The Arnolds found out about her romantic rendezvous after Dorothy pawned $500 worth of jewels and used the $60 payout to finance her week-long stay. Once home, Dorothy was told to end her relationship with Junior because he was unsuitable. Despite their disapproval, Dorothy and Junior continued to correspond by mail. She saw Junior one final time in early November of 1910, shortly before he left on vacation to Florence, Italy with his parents. On December 16th, 6 days after her disappearance, the Arnold family sent a telegram to Junior asking if he had any information about Dorothy. In a returned telegram, Junior denied having any knowledge of her whereabouts and claimed to know nothing of her disappearance. In early January of 1911, Mary and her son John traveled to Italy by ship to interview Junior in person. They all met in his room at the Anglo-American Hotel on January 16th, during which time Junior maintained that he knew nothing of Dorothy's disappearance. Mary and John demanded that Junior give them the letters that Dorothy had sent to him. John later claimed the letters contained nothing of importance, so he had destroyed them. In February 1911, upon his return to the States, Junior told the press that he intended to marry Dorothy once she was found, and on the condition that her mother approve of the marriage. Mary later told reporters she would never approve of the union. In the months following his return, Junior spent thousands of dollars on ads in major newspapers asking Dorothy to come home. Perhaps it was suicide. Junior theorized that Dorothy had committed suicide because she was despondent over her failed writing career. Adding credence to this theory, the Thanksgiving before she disappeared, Dorothy traveled to Washington, D.C. to visit her good friend, Theodora Bates, for the holiday weekend. On Thanksgiving morning, despite the fact that it was a holiday, a bulky envelope was delivered for Dorothy via U.S. mail. On accepting the package at the door, Theodora quickly concluded that the package contained Dorothy's rejected manuscript, Lotus Leaves. Dorothy, still lounging in bed, did not open the envelope or even comment out of it. Out of respect for her friend's privacy, Theodora did not ask Dorothy any questions. On Friday, Dorothy surprised both her friend and then her own mother by returning home to New York early. That Monday, she visited the 34th Street Post Office to receive several letters from Junior. In Dorothy's letter of response to Junior, which she had saved and returned to the family when they came to visit him in Italy, contained an intriguing paragraph. Quote, "Well, it has come back. McClure's has turned me down. All I can see ahead is a long road with no turning. Mother will always think an accident has happened," end quote. Some of Dorothy's family members and friends also believed she had committed suicide because her relationship with Junior was faltering. Furthering this theory were the steamship folders found on Dorothy's desk, but no passengers were reported missing from ocean crossing liners during the early days of her disappearance. Perhaps it was a botched abortion. The most widespread rumor about Dorothy's disappearance was that she had become pregnant after her time with Junior in Boston and had sought an illegal abortion. Did the Thanksgiving Day package Dorothy received in Washington, D.C. contain the name of an abortionist along with the necessary funds for the procedure? This rumor gained some credibility when in April of 1916, an underground abortion clinic operating out of the basement of a home in Bellevue, Pennsylvania, was raided by police. The clinic, known as the House of Mystery, was run by Dr. C.C. Meredith. Dr. H.E. Lutz, who worked at the clinic, testified to the New York County DA that Dr. Meredith had told him that Dorothy Arnold had died there after experiencing complications from an abortion. Dr. Lutz claimed that, like many of the women who had undergone abortions at the clinic and died, her body was cremated in the furnace. Coincidentally, in April of 1916, while imprisoned in Rhode Island for extortion, Edward Glenoris told the warden that he was paid $250 to bury the body of a young woman back in December of 1910. Glenoris claimed that an acquaintance known as Little Louie hired him to drive a woman from a home in New Rochelle, New York to West Point. At the New Rochelle home, Glenoris stated that he and Little Louie were met by two men, one of whom was named Doc and the other whom Glenoris described as wealthy and well-dressed. Glenoris and Little Louie then loaded the unconscious woman into their car and drove her to a house in Weehawken, New Jersey. During the drive, Glenoris said that Little Louie told him that the woman was Dorothy Arnold. Glenoris also said that he recognized Dorothy as well as her signet ring on her left index finger. The next day, upon returning to Weehawken, Doc informed Little Louie and Glenoris that the woman had died during an operation. Glenoris said that he and Little Louie, Glenoris said that he and Little Louie then drove the woman's body back to the home in New Rochelle, wrapped her in a sheet, and buried her in the cellar. The prison warden reported Glenoris' story to authorities. However, subsequent interviews with law enforcement, Glenoris acted confused and claimed he knew nothing about Dorothy Arnold's whereabouts. Police followed up on Glenoris' initial claim and excavated the cellars of several homes in the area, but did not locate any human remains. The aftermath of this tragic story is that in April 1921, a shocking statement from Police Captain John H. Ayers, the head of Missing Persons Bureau, told the press, Dorothy Arnold is no longer listed as missing person. Ayers gave no further details, but added, her parents, relatives, and friends have suddenly ceased their search activity. A lawyer for the family denied the case had been cracked. Frances Arnold spent about $250,000 trying to find his daughter and maintained that she had been kidnapped and murdered the day she disappeared. Francis died in 1922 at age 85, and his wife passed in 1928 at age 72. Both left behind wills which stated, quote, I have made no provision for my beloved daughter, Dorothy H.C. Arnold, as I'm satisfied that she is no longer alive, end quote. Shortly after Mary's death, John Keith publicly stated that he believed Dorothy had committed suicide because of her failed writing career. The sources for this were Wikipedia, American Heritage, The Girl Who Never Came Back, published in August of 1960, and allthat'sinteresting.com, The Mysterious Case of Dorothy Arnold, the Wealthy Socialite Who Vanished in Plain Sight by Natasha Ishak on January 13th, 2021. So B, what do you think? What do you think happened?
This was there really wasn't like a big glob of energy for me to jump onto and go, okay, there's a lot of energy here. I can, pick this apart. We're going to do another podcast on the Smutty Nose murder mystery. That's got a lot of energy to it. Similar time frame, probably 25 years earlier, the Smutty Nose, but there's a lot more energy there. So it was interesting that there just wasn't a lot to kind of grab onto with this case. And I had to really kind of work on it, be still and just wait for the information to kind of come. So immediately my thought was there were two men that were involved with her demise. And so with the abortion theory, where there was, Little Louie and the other guy and a guy named Doc, blah, 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 blah. Right. So there were parts of that spoke of, yeah, okay, that kind of hits. That sort of hits. But when I finally did kind of get a feel for her energy, I strongly feel she was not pregnant. I don't think she was pregnant at all. I just don't. And that's kind of backed up from the standpoint of she goes and she bumps into her friend at the bookshop. They were at like a bookstore. Yeah.
Gladys on the corner
Gladys,
of,
right. 27th.
Yes.
And they're having a conversation. They're having a long conversation. They're talking about going to the debutante ball of her sister. And someone who's about to get an abortion they're not interested in that kind of conversation. They are, I've got to go. It's like, it's almost an embarrassment to see someone,
you wouldn't want to be recognized.
Exactly. And all of that walking that she was doing around, she was kind of, it was sort of a leisurely way to spend an afternoon. This would have been a woman that didn't work, probably didn't have a lot of commitments, right? Writing was the thing that occupied her time. She's been rejected 3 times now. So she's moved that off of the list of things to do to occupy a day, at least for the time being. So what else is she going to do? She's wealthy. She's single. She's got New York a New York playground to go play in. She's going to go shopping. She's going to bump into a friend. She's going to have a conversation. She stops for chocolate and something to read. This isn't a woman from my perspective, in that kind of distress of facing an abortion and all the stuff that might come with that, right? And I also felt really strongly, if she had been pregnant, she would have told Junior. I just feel like that would have been in a letter. She would have, that just wouldn't have been something that she would have hidden from him, because obviously she wanted to marry him, and she wanted an excuse, right? Her parents wanted them to separate.
Yeah,
Her parents wanted them to be apart. Here's a built-in excuse. Shameful though it might be, but we know that it happened in those types of families.
Yeah.
It happened everywhere. So that kind of stuff can be covered up and hushed up, and all of that. Quick wedding, in Europe somewhere where no one can see the baby bump. So none of that really held water to me, but the two men feeling did. So what I did was I pulled up a map of that section of Manhattan, and I just sort of tried to trace her steps down Fifth Avenue to 27th Street and then back up, because she had said she was going to go through Central Park. Now, the timing is kind of interesting, because the last person to see her alive is right around 2:00, right?
Right.
So Gladys sees her at 2 p.m. She's got 30 blocks to walk from 20 some odd.
She's got almost 70.
To walk back up. Right. Well, no, 50.
60.
She's got 50. Right, to walk back up, because she's
Who
at
can
79th
add?
Street. She's at 7. So we get out a calculator.
Let me get my glasses
How many
back
blocks?
on. That'll make
I
the
know.
change.
My God, Sandy, we need a cocktail.
What time is
Obviously,
it?
we're gonna break here for a minute and go get our a glass of wine and go in there or something. Anyway, so she's got many blocks to walk. It's 2:00. She's in what was the name of that skirt? The skirt that she was in, Sands. She was dressed in the skirt that made it difficult for her to walk. Hobble skirt. She was in a hobble skirt, right? Which is apropos. So if you don't know what a hobble skirt is, it's a skirt where the hem at the bottom is very small to constrict the length of the stride of a woman. This was considered obviously kind of, dainty, right? You take these little baby steps. So that would have been a journey for someone in a hobble skirt. But again, it's a way to occupy the day and to fill the day with something to do and to see the sights and sounds of New York while you're doing it. So she is headed back up to 79th Street. She's going to go through Central Park. She leaves her friend at 2:00. It probably takes her 45 minutes to get to the entrance, 45 minutes to an hour, I would imagine, right? Taking little baby steps, 30 blocks, would take a while.
Well, it took her 3 hours to get to 27th Street, because she left the house at 11 and then walked from 79th
So
Street.
it would have taken her an hour to an hour and a half, right? To
Yeah.
get to the southeast entrance to Central Park.
Right.
If she was in fact going through Central Park, and I'll bet you she was. I bet you she was true to her word. So she goes into Central Park. It's now then 3:30, 3:45. It's starting to get dark, right?
Yeah.
It's also the time of day where there wouldn't be a lot of people around in Central Park, because everybody's still working until 5, or women are running home to start dinner, that kind of thing, right? So a little debutante is out kind of at that hour, probably with not a lot of people around. So I felt that she was followed probably around the time that she entered Central Park. There was a feeling of two men stalking her. And I feel that she made it up to 65th Street. And I feel that she became aware that two men were following her and there was no one around. The way that she was dressed kind of invited someone to come, mug her, rob her, which is, I think, what happened. I think that they didn't necessarily plan on inflicting violence on her, but I believe that she fought back. I believe that she probably screamed, that she struggled. And in that struggle, I believe that she was knocked out. And then they've got this woman, right? And I think that they dragged her
Could
off.
probably identify them, like she probably
Sure.
with the struggle might have been able
Yeah,
to
exactly.
identify them.
She could have described them, right?
Yeah.
So now they've got an unconscious woman. This is my theory. This is what I'm picking up in the ether. They've got this unconscious woman. I felt that they took her east. They headed straight, or excuse me, they took her west. So they took her west. And what was interesting was I felt that they left Central Park and I felt that they entered woods. So if I looked on the map, what I found was Riverside Park, which is, if she made it to 65th Street, which was kind of a direct line across 65th Street. If you just keep following 65th Street, you hit Riverside Park, which is a wooded area. And then I felt that they put her in water, and the Hudson River is right there. And I felt it wasn't a lake. I felt it wasn't a pond. I felt that it was like almost like a canal. And if you look at the Hudson River, it is kind of a canal, I mean, yes, it's wide, but it's kind of a canal shape. And then that was it. That was it. I don't think that they left her clothed. I think that they took her hat. I think they took her muff. I think that they took her coat. They might have left her skirt. I don't think they wanted her identified. I think that they really wanted her to just disappear.
Cool.
That you had mentioned that the Hudson River is pretty polluted.
I assume
now.
it was.
Yeah, now I can only imagine what it was back then.
Yeah.
I don't know how many, there are 8.8 million people in New York now. I have no idea how many people there were back in 1910, but certainly wasn't a small town, and all the sewers led right to the most convenient waterway.
Right.
So I would imagine, that the Hudson River had not just human body parts occasionally, but that probably had animal parts, butchers and all of that stuff. So it's kind of a primordial soup going on in there. And that's what I feel happened to her. And you had said something
Right.
about
So what I did not include in the story, but in my research, and I dismissed it because I was convinced that she actually had a botched abortion. But in my reading of this case, there was a notation that several women had been mugged and or taken out of Central Park around the same time that Dorothy did. In the year 1910, 11, it wasn't uncommon, which I guess supports why her father was so convinced that that's what had happened to her. Right. And I guess, they just didn't look at the right waterway for her.
Exactly. Exactly. I don't think that he thought she was taken out of Central Park. I think he thought she was left in Central Park, or abducted and taken to another location. And when I finally did hit on her energy, it was interesting because it was almost like I could look up, like I was, if I was Dorothy, I was lying on my back and looking up and seeing trees, forested trees, and feeling like I was being pulled into forest that was how Central Park, everything's landscaped and beautiful, and this didn't feel like, this felt like actual kind of forest. And what I also noticed was that the moon looked almost full. So I went and looked online to see what state of the moon was on December 12th, 1910, and it was a waxing Gibbons moon, I think is that. Wow. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Basically, it was 3 days away from being full. So it was full on the 16th. And I feel like that's the last thing that Dorothy saw as she was looking up. She saw the moon. And then it was lights out. So I feel like she was strangled. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier. I felt like she was strangled. They just wanted to get rid of the evidence, is kind of my feeling. I have no idea what happened to her clothes. I'm pretty sure they didn't throw those in there. I'm pretty sure that they took those up to some other location and dumped them or buried them or did something, because they definitely didn't want her identified. But that to me is kind of, that's the feeling of what I felt happened to her. And it, to me, almost makes the most sense, because when you look at the way that it was described that she had this abortion, and that they called this guy, little Louie, come pick up the body and take it to this house. And, really, like, that sounds really too elaborate.
Too many trips.
Exactly.
Back and forth.
And then, a guy's like, well, I recognized her. How did he recognize her? Where did he see her?
Well, by this point in time, he's reporting in 1916 that he recognized her. So there's been 4 years of publicity You know, there were a lot of newspaper articles, a lot of,
I recognize her. A woman who's been through an abortion, right, in 1910 and dies from it, you're not going to recognize her. She's going to be, trust me, she's going to be in a state. She's not going to look like her photo at all. She's going to look traumatized, even in death. That's not going to look like her. So I'm not buying it for a second. I think that was wishful thinking. It was also kind of too weirdly detailed for me. And, you know, he suddenly has this confession in 1916. Where was he in 1910 when the family was in agony? And there was probably a reward out there.
Yeah, there was $1,000 as reported. Yes.
Yeah, that's a shit ton of money.
Well, if you consider that these muggers ended up with the equivalent of $800 today, it was, you know, 50 some odd dollars back then. They hit pay dirt, unfortunately. Yeah. Sadly.
Who knows, you know, her jewelry, she was probably wearing jewelry as well. They probably fenced that or sold that. So she would have been a very easy target. You know, you put a woman in a hobble skirt.
Yep.
It's meant to hobble them. This is why you don't do that to women. You allow women the freedom of fucking pants. So.
Okay, well, I'm glad we've advanced past the point of hobble skirts and are now wearing pants.
Yes, yay. Exactly. Hobble skirts and
even
tiny shoes and high heels and send them 60 blocks, you know, stupid, just stupid. Anyway. So yeah.
Really surprising ending from what I thought had happened. So thank you for sharing your impressions.
Thank you
really
for sharing your theory.
Yeah.
Thank you for writing this up. Thank you for being my co-host. Thank you for being my sister.
Okay, really, I was trying to do like the professional wrap up, but thanks. Go ahead.
I think we're well beyond that professional wrap up. Aren't you adorable? You're so adorable.
Yes,
that's going in a book. That's going in. I was trying to do the professional wrap up in a book.
Okay, fine.
Going in a book.
Whatevs.
Thank you. You're welcome. All right, guys, that's it. That's all we got today. We did it. We got through the third Pen podcast. Woohoo! We will be back same time, same station for another installment. I think that you guys are really going to love the Smutty Nose Murder's Funny Name. Terrible case. And Sandy and I will attack that next week. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening. Everybody have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Sandy, I love you. I love you. I love you. Don't say ditto. And I will talk to you probably in an hour or so because we talk like a plan constantly. All right. Okay. I love you.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.